Hello and welcome to UKGM. I'm Kenny and today we're going to be going through some of the core concepts of DMing in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Here at UKGM we offer private DM training as well as Dungeon Master workshops, both online and in person. If that's something you're interested in, feel free to go and check those out at our website. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been DMing for the last 10 years now and I've been training DMs for the last 3. I have designed today's course to be helpful for new DMs, but have those basic concepts stretched out to a higher level so that even the most experienced GM will get something from this session today. And hopefully all of you will be able to implement this in your current games. Okay, let's get started. So the areas we are going to be covering today are Master of Worlds, Master of Adventures, and Master of Rules. You may have seen these before if you've looked in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They explain all of these in rather limited detail, only dedicating a small portion of the book to them. Today we're going to be going into detail with them, but think of these as areas that you need to cover in your game. Just have a think if you know what these 3 areas actually mean, and have a think of which ones do you think you're strongest with and which one do you think you're weakest with. I would recommend having a notebook or something to type up as you're watching this, because you are something like 30% more likely to remember something if you write it down. So I recommend getting some notes out as we're going along. Okay, let's get started with Master of Worlds. What do you think this means? This is your world building. This is creating a believable fictional world that your players can come into. This is part of a shared story, which we'll talk about next. I'm going to talk to you about the inspiration I get and where you can find your inspiration to help you when you're stuck with creative juices and creative flow. I'm going to teach you about consistency, because consistency is key when believing in a fictional world. Some core beliefs that you need to put into your world when world building. Obviously your NPCs that are your heart and soul of your world. And finally, maps. A clear visual representation for players to be able to see data. Okay, shared story. What does this mean? This means that you and your players write your story and your world. This isn't just the adventure, as I'll go through when we get to the Master of Adventures. This is where you need to include your players in your world building. Now, when you're first coming up with the concept of your world, you can't do this unless characters have already sent you backstories, etc. Unless players have sent you backstories, etc. in advance, you can't do it to start with. But you can give them plenty of opportunities that their actions can be included. I would say in your story, it should be maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40, depending on if you don't want to give up too much creative control. But if you want your own story, which players play in, then I'd suggest maybe writing a book, because that's 100% your own story. Players are going to mess up your story. It's not going to be exactly the way you want it to be. But if you want the truth, in my experience, it makes the story so much better. And when they have a clear input in the story, they enjoy the sessions so much more. So looking over to the right here, I put, when you're making your world, include their actions in that world. Creating NPCs, give players an effect on those NPCs. This could be positive or negative depending on the characters and players that you have around the table. Creating cities, how do the players affect those cities? I'm going to give you some examples here of how they can impact them. Let me just click all of them so you can have a read as I go through them. So including the characters' actions, this could be mentioning the group to other groups. If you're like me, you maybe run more than one group a week, then having them both in the same world at the same time and maybe getting them to come up with a team name or something they're well known for, and then another group hearing about their accomplishments can be a really good way of building up their reputation and prestige. You could have an NPC they've just met, heard of them already, and their great accomplishments, and going, oh, are you part of the, I don't know, Silver Six? Oh, you're amazing. It's small ways of acknowledging things they've done in the past. And you can even foreshadow this with when they're nobodies, no one knowing who they are, no one giving them much of the time of day, and then they accomplish something, or they save the town from, I don't know, a goblin attack. And then all of a sudden, people treat them differently. This could also happen in a negative light as well, if they do something negative towards the town. Players do have an effect on NPCs, and this could be their alignment, their job, their outlook on life. They have character development. NPCs have character development. NPCs are not just quest givers. They're not just quest givers. For those who like World of Warcraft, they're not just quest givers. They have their own life, their own agendas, their own likes, personalities, beliefs. Flesh out your NPCs, because if they are two-dimensional quest givers, then the players will notice this straight away and not invest any time in them. We're going to talk more about NPCs later, but just remember, just as the players can develop as characters, so can the NPCs. Okay, how can the players affect the city? They could change the political structure, the landscape. A recent party of mine managed to dethrone the mayor of a town and get their own mayor in their place. So the new mayor has their own outlooks and beliefs, which are going to change the outlook of the town. And they've also got the sort of backing of the party for protection, and it changes the whole way the town's going to operate. Especially since the previous mayor was into some things that the party didn't deem correct, and they want to change the way the town works. This could also be really tiny things like a statue in their honour. This could be a portrait up or in the Hall of Fame. This can mean a lot to players, and it's such a little gesture by the DM. And something I would recommend every time. Okay. How are you going to include your players in your world? Now, I've written some example hooks around here, but if you want the truth, it is communication is key, and you need to maybe even have a private conversation or chat with some of your players, find out what they want. Make some of the side plots the most memorable moments. I know that I've created an amazing story, in my opinion, which is the main story I want them to follow. But then they fall off the path and go somewhere else and do some silly side plot with, I don't know, some farm or mill. And it ends up being the most memorable part of the campaign. And that's why it's so important to have this shared storytelling moment. So how are you going to include your players while they are in the game? Now, this is something you need to do, and something that is very easy to do. Including them in some way could be an NPC knowing them and saying hi, like I said earlier. That could be such a simple thing to do. Statue a picture in their honour, another really, really simple thing. Maybe the land, the lord of the land, maybe even a mayor, maybe a local official, gives them a rank. The rank can be meaningless, but don't tell them that. It has meaning in itself by giving it to them. So have a think of maybe some ranks, and maybe even before the quest begins, they see someone with this rank already, and then all of a sudden they're going, oh, well, I want that rank. And then they manage to get it. This could also be media in your town. Media is a big part of any world. Now, your world, depending on the technology level, might not have printing press yet. However, they will have some way of broadcasting propaganda, depending on the type of world that you're building, or just broadcasting the news. Now, if something bad happens with the party, and it doesn't even have to directly be them in it, it could just be, oh, a local fire happened, but that was actually the party's fault. And then they see it on a local poster, or maybe up on a town square bulletin. Include them in some way. These are only a few ways, and as I put at the top, just include them. It doesn't matter how, but anything that they do, any small actions, jot them down and use them later on. It means a lot to your players, trust me.